All right, hi everyone. My name is Pooja Vishwanathan. I'm the CEO of Braze Mobility. So we're here today to talk about Braze Mobility. So I'm going to do a product demonstration for you guys, and then open it up to questions to see how we might be able to serve your clients. So I'll start off with talking a little bit about my background, and so I started doing research in smart wheelchairs several years ago. This has been over a decade now that I've been working in this area. And after working on a lot of fairly sophisticated smart wheelchair systems in 2016, I founded Braze Mobility. And the main purpose of this company and the product that we designed was to really help people with increasing their spatial awareness, because what we started to hear time and time again is that wheelchair users really struggled with being able to see around them, especially since with power wheelchairs being extremely big and bulky devices and fairly hard to maneuver in tight spaces. And so the product that I'll be showing you today is our blind spot sensor system. The sensors provide audio, visual, and vibration alerts, and those are regarding both location and proximity of obstacles. So as I said, my background in this space spans over a decade, and a lot of my initial work actually started off in long-term care facilities, where a lot of the residents there, because of some of the safety concerns, there were often decisions that needed to be made by staff as to whether somebody should get a power chair or not, or get to keep their power chair or not in a long-term care facility. And so that's where a lot of my work stemmed. In fact, I've worked with a lot of wheelchair users with cognitive impairment, and that's where the kind of initial part of my research was. So this screen that you're seeing right here is just a small fraction, really, and this is all my work in the area, but it's a pretty small fraction of the work that's actually happened around the world in terms of smart wheelchair development. And so while the product that I'm going to show you today is fairly new, it's only a couple of years old, and it's the only product really like it in the market, this is just to kind of give you a sense that the research behind the product has actually taken place for over a decade. And so we're only starting to now see some parts of the research come out into the real world, and there's a lot more that still is yet to come. And so we're really scratching the surface in terms of what we can do with sensor technologies today and how those can be used to improve safety and independence for those who use wheelchairs. All right, so I'm going to start off with just kind of describing. So these are the kind of the problems we're trying to solve, right? So property damage is a huge one. We've seen that especially within homes, but also within facilities. And so for the end user, our product increases their independence and confidence by providing this multimodal feedback, but also for caregivers and institutions, by reducing property damage and potentially increasing safety for everyone. It does create a safer environment and more just peace of mind and confidence for the caregivers as well. So I'll jump right into some case studies here, and I'll cover a broad range of users that we work with to give you a sense of the kinds of customers that might benefit from this sort of technology. So I'll start off here with Phil Ratzlaff. So he is a U.S. Marine veteran, has MS, legal blindness, and is amputated in both legs. He's a power wheelchair user. He lives in his own home, and he had an incident where he had driven right into a baby stroller. Thankfully, there was no baby in the stroller, but it really terrified him and prompted him to go look for solutions. And that's when he found our solution online and talked to his therapist about it. And this was then a system that was evaluated by the therapist at the Minneapolis VA and was funded for him. Now, Phil has sensors both in the front and the rear, and he uses the visual, auditory, and vibration alerts. So the multimodality really helps him since he is legally blind. Now, the next client we have here is Katie, who was 7 when she first met us. She's got cerebral palsy. She's a student. She is a power wheelchair user, but uses a head array. And so she lives at home with her parents, and her parents were really concerned because while she was at school, they were concerned that she would be bumping into other kids at the school and with other students also not necessarily really understanding how much space she needed to maneuver. You know, they'd often get in the way as well. And so one of the primary reasons they reached out was, since she drives with a head array, they found that whenever she would try to do a shoulder check to be able to look behind her and around her to maneuver, she'd end up inadvertently activating the head array switch. And so the therapist reached out saying, you know, do you have a solution? Because she keeps activating the head array when she's doing a shoulder check. So it would be nice to give her some better spatial awareness, you know, in that situation. And so we evaluated her with the system as well. And Katie was great. She picked up the system really quickly. She found the auditory alert extremely easy to understand. And so within the very first training session, we got Katie to back up through a doorway using just the lights and the sounds, and she was able to do that successfully. All right, the next client we have here is David, who is a long-term care resident. Now he drives the power chair. He's used a power chair used it for several years. Mainly drives in a tilt position, which means that he had very little visibility behind his chair, but also kind of in the front around where his footrests were, because he was in that tilt position. He couldn't really see what was going on close to his footrests. So he lives in a long-term care facility, and the concern there was that the therapists were starting to see a lot of incidents of David bumping into things, and they were concerned for his safety, but also safety of others in the facility. And so they were looking at potentially, you know, taking the power chair away from him, but wanted to look into some other options. So they evaluated David with our system as well, and they found, you know, it was really night and day in terms of his performance with and without the sensors. And so they put in an application for funding. This device was fully funded by an organization here in Canada, and you know, since then it's been almost 2 years now that David's stayed independent and mobile with his chair, and you know, he's driving at a much higher level of safety. And you know, the caregivers just feel a lot more relaxed because they're not seeing any incidents that they were seeing earlier on. All right. All right, so next here we have Wade, who is a very high-skilled wheelchair user. And you can see here that he's able to maneuver in a very, very tight space. That was his bedroom that he was just coming out into the hallway. Wade has a power chair as well as a manual chair, and he actually uses his system for both his manual chair and his power chair, and he uses it primarily to be able to navigate in tight spaces. He also navigates quite a bit in public spaces where there's, you know, often a lot of people, and there's a lot of safety or security issues with feeling like somebody might be sneaking up on him. This was a common concern actually that we found, where a lot of individuals were feeling like being out in public spaces, that there was a risk that someone would sneak up on them and steal things from their backpacks, which was often hanging in the back of their chairs. I'm just starting to see some raising of hands. I'm just wondering, are there any questions here? I'll just pause and take a look at the chats here. So Wade needed something to really get in those tight spaces. And so this was a video of him coming out of his bedroom and into the hallway. And then I'm going to show you one more video of him trying to get out of his kitchen.
Usually when I come into my kitchen, I have extreme problems as it is. It's a tight space. It was never designed for a wheelchair, but being in a wheelchair and being that I like to cook, I have to come into my kitchen, and doing so as you can see, it's a very tight space, and having the drive in leaves me no alternative but to drive out and back out. As I'm backing out, it is impossible for me to be able to see the doorway behind me and to see the handle that is on this fridge, which by the way has been torn off this fridge a number of times and glued back on. But with this device, I don't even have to look behind me or try to look. I just look at the light system which right now is giving me 3 green lights, and as well as vibrating pads that are in my back are telling me as I back up if I am in the center of the doorway. As long as none of these lights turn red, I know that I am centered and I am not going to hit anything. As well, there's vibrating pads in my back. If I am looking straight ahead and not at the lights, if I'm carrying something or as I'm coming out, it will warn me. So if one of the pads, if the left one goes off, I know I'm about to tear the handle off my fridge. If the right one goes off, I know I'm about to hit this doorway, which already has no paint left on it. And so as the lights stay green, I back out, and as you can see, I am not hitting anything. I am coming straight out through the door, and even though that is such a tight space, I've made it without touching or damaging anything.
So that was Wade, and then the next client we have here is Betty, who is also a power chair user in a long-term care home. It was a similar situation here as David, where Betty was having some incidents of hitting things in the long-term care facility, and the staff were starting to look at whether it was time to take her power chair away. And after doing an evaluation with the system, in fact, within Betty got the system, purchased the system right away with her family purchasing it. And within 8 months, Betty was not only able to drive indoors, but also her outdoor driving, which had actually been restricted by the facility. She wasn't allowed to drive outdoors on her own anymore. They actually lifted that constraint as well. So she was able to both drive indoors at normal speeds, as well as drive outdoors, which really improved her quality of life. So this was a story that was really highlighted by the therapist as perhaps one of our greatest success stories in terms of someone who has now, again, for almost 2 years, continued to stay independent and mobile, whereas she might have been one of those residents that lost her power chair a couple of years ago. Here's the system, and I'll kind of go through what all the different parts are. So let me turn off the lights while I'm explaining. So this system on the bottom is called a Sentina. It sees around 180 degrees of horizontal, has 180 degrees of horizontal coverage, and then about 45 to 50 degrees of vertical coverage. So this sensor is typically placed in the rear of the chair. However, it can be placed in the front as well with some additional mounting. And so the idea here is to use this sensor when you've got sort of a broad range of coverage that is needed. This piece right here is the controller. This is what gives the visual and auditory feedback and has a bunch of buttons that can control the whole system. What I have here is a power bank that is providing charge to the whole system. So this is a 2200 milliamp hour power bank, very similar to ones that you might use to charge your phone. A small power bank like this can give the system up to 10 to 12 hours of charge. So this is useful for someone maybe using the system on a manual chair where there's no other power supply. In the case of a powered wheelchair, the wheelchair battery itself can be used to power the system. And because the draw of the system in terms of power is so low, it really will not affect the day-to-day usage of the chair itself. So that's another great option. This little sensor right here is called an echo head. These sensors are used for more targeted coverage. They're often used for peripheral vision coverage. So a typical configuration might be a Sentina like this in the back, and then 2 echo heads like these in the front, in the corners, kind of facing an angle to help get through doorways and things like that. So these echo heads see about a 45 to 50 degree cone. So that's it for the part. So let me get the system activated now. So I turn the button on, and that's what turns the system on. And you'll notice one blue light in the center. That blue light indicates what mode the system's operating in. One blue light means short range. Now in short range, the system is set up to really detect obstacles in very tight spaces. And so we have 2 different warnings that come up in short range. Danger is 1 foot. So anything within a foot is in the danger zone. And anything within 2 feet, it shows up in the warning zone. Danger shows up as a red light and warning shows up as a yellow light. So let me just demonstrate that right now. So as I move my hand in front of the bottom sensors, so actually let me just get rid of the other one. Wait. All right. So as I put my hand in front of these sensors in the bottom, you'll notice that the lights move from left to right as I go around, and you're seeing red lights because I'm within that danger zone. If I move further away, you'll notice some of those lights turn yellow. The yellow and red, I'm not sure how clearly it's showing up on your screen, but in real life, these lights are actually quite powerful, and the visibility is a lot better than what you might see on, you know, a computer screen or a phone screen. So these lights are purposely set up to be this way and not on a screen because their visibility is much better than for those with low vision. So you're seeing proximity then and position based on where the lights show up, and you know, where that light is indicates kind of where the obstacle is. Now, what you noticed earlier was that there was a light coming up on top. So I'm going to plug that sensor back in here. And the light that comes up on top now on this row is this sensor that I have here. So as it sees this sensor, you'll see the red light come up on the top. Now, the reason for that is because these echo heads are usually placed in the front. The light on top indicates to the customer that objects in the front, if there's something in the front, it's going to show up on the top row. If there's something on the back, so the Sentinel is usually on the back of the chair, then obstacles in front of the Sentinel will show up on the bottom row. So they can tell the difference between obstacles in front of them and behind them by just looking at the controller and where the lights are. Okay, so that is the short range mode, and I just showed you the location and proximity and how that's done. Now, if I touch this big bright button again, I toggle into long range mode. So now I have two blue lights there in the center. That's telling me that's in long range. Long range means that all the distance now are doubled. So instead of 1 foot for danger, we have 2 feet for danger. Instead of 2 feet for warning, we have 4 feet for warning. And so the sensors are now seeing double the distances away, and they're giving the person warnings a lot earlier so that the person can respond to them. So this might be in the case where the person's outdoors, you know, where they're perhaps driving a little bit faster, or in cases where clients have delayed reaction times and they need an earlier warning in order to be able to react. So that's basically it for the visual feedback. I'm going to go into short range mode again now, and I'm going to show you some of the other feedback. So if I push this button, so on the top here, there is a red button. If I push it down, I activate the audio feedback. And so now if I get within that danger area, you hear a beep. Now the beep only comes up in the danger zone, and that's because, you know, we don't want to be constantly beeping in warning zone. That would be excessive. The beeping also doesn't keep going if everything is stationary. So if the person's, for example, parked in an elevator, the chair's not moving, the elevator walls are not moving, it won't continue to beep. But if they do try to go closer to the elevator walls, or if someone's maybe, you know, moving in closer to the chair, then it will start to get, you know, aggressively louder as the obstacle approaches closer and closer to the sensors. So that's the audio feedback. And then the final kind of feedback is vibration. And that's controlled by the last switch on this controller. So this is a vibration module, and there's up to 3 of them that can be inserted into various different parts of the chair. So that includes the armrest, the seat cushions, and the backrest. So depending on where the different vibration modules are, so you can have up to 3, 1 in the left, 1 in the center, 1 in the right. And what that means is if there's then something on the right, just like Wade explained in his video, if there's a vibration on the right, then the client knows that there's an obstacle on the right. If there's a vibration on the left side of the chair, they know the obstacle's on the left side of the chair. And so that's a very handy modality as well for those with low vision. So we do have legally blind customers that find the vibrations extremely helpful. In fact, they kind of describe it as a sixth sense. And it's really useful because even if the person's engaged, for example, in a conversation, they're not really paying attention, they're talking to somebody in front of them, even if they're stationary, but somebody is moving behind them, they can actually feel the vibrations from right to left, for example, indicating that there is a person that just moved in that direction behind them. So it really becomes like kind of this additional sense that's there while the person might be doing other things. They're still kind of somewhat cognizant of what's going on around them. So that is it for, to admit Alvin here again. That's it for, that's pretty much it for all the different types of feedback and how the sensors work. I'm just going to take another pause there. Were there any other questions here before I go on? So the other thing that I wanted to show everyone here is when we first put this product out, we had some therapists asking us how they would know whether a candidate could benefit from our system. So, you know, we had therapists who were seeing clients with different sort of cognitive capabilities, and they were curious as to whether this would work. And so I'm actually seeing a question related to this now. How do you find the learning processes for long-term care residents that may have early stages of cognitive decline? So what we've seen is, of course, you know, it really varies person to person, because even the way in which their cognition might be impaired might be different. And so we find that, you know, some users, even with mild or moderate dementia, you know, can still understand what's going on. We model the system off of fairly intuitive concepts. And so the red and yellow lights, just like traffic lights. And so we had even users with dementia that would look at that and say, oh, red, yeah, red means stop. Similarly, the vibration feedback we found to be quite, in my research days, quite effective with users with dementia, because they would feel the vibration and they would automatically associate it with a sort of warning, even if they didn't really understand what was going on. They would perceive that as the chair trying to warn them about something. And so we do see a lot of users with varying levels of impairment still use the system. Now, of course, you know, there might be cases where the person has such a severe impairment that they're just unable to map what they're seeing to an actual behavior. And so, you know, things like this do take trials. I mean, we see everything from clients who learn how to do it within, you know, 10 to 15 minutes to clients who we've seen eureka moments, you know, eureka moments with almost a year after having the system, using it every day. And so that has been the case as well in long-term care with slight cognitive impairments. We've seen users who for an entire month like don't really seem like they're getting it, and then a month later the therapist calls and says they're doing really well and they seem to have figured it out. So it does vary. You know, we do often, especially if there's a cognitive impairment, we do try to offer trials and give the person a bit more time to learn. And we generally recommend that they use the system as much as possible so that they're sort of building those connections. Can this system be used on motor scooters and manual wheelchairs? Absolutely. They can be used on scooters, and they can also be used on manual chairs. Like I mentioned, there is you can power the whole system with just a portable battery, portable power bank. And so that can be used. If not, the big sensors, what we often find for manual chairs is that individuals use the small echo heads. And so we can just have, you know, 2 or 3 echo heads, how many ever is necessary, that can be put on a manual chair. So they might not need the entire 180 degrees on the Sentina. A few of those echo heads in the rear might help with the manual wheelchairs as well. Who does the training? So our reps, when they come in, are the ones that usually train the individual. And really the training that is offered is fairly simple. You know, we'll just get them to do a few maneuvers, for example, backing up into a wall, and then teaching them how to respond. And we'll start off with very, very simple techniques. So things like, hey, back up into a wall. You know, when you see the yellow light, slow down. And when you see the red light, take your hand off the joystick. Or, hey, you know, slowly back up into the wall. But when you hear the audio beep, take your hand off the joystick. Things like that. And so very, very simple. And that gives us a very good idea of whether the person can respond. Now, in cases where, you know, there is someone with a cognitive impairment and you're not so sure, we do have the simulator app that I can show you fairly quickly that can teach you how to identify, you know, maybe what level of cognitive impairment there is and whether they will be able to respond or not. So I will show you that in just a moment. You mentioned Motion is the vendor in our area. Are there any other vendors in our area? We can work with whatever vendor you prefer. So we do work with Motion, but if you've got other vendors that you work with, just let us know, and you know, we'll work with the vendor and we'll train them and work that out as well. Okay, so I'm going to quickly pull up here another screen share just so I can show you how you will be able to use our simulator. So even when you don't have the system, you can actually do some quick tests with your client to see if they might benefit. All right. So this is our simulator app, and like you said, this can be used as sort of like a pre-screening tool to see who might benefit from this system. And so, especially if you're thinking of someone with cognitive impairment, and you're thinking, I just want to see if they even respond to a cue. And that's really what to look for. Is you're really looking for responsiveness. If the client's responsible or responsive to the cues, you've got a fairly good confidence level that they will likely respond to the system and be able to stop or slow down or do whatever the system is cueing them to do. So I'll start here with the basic setup, which does a quick screen. So we'll go in here and you see the different types of feedback that the system offers. So what it is this app can be used to offer the same sorts of cues that our system offers. So that way, even if you don't have an installation done of the system, any one of you can just download this app. It is available on Apple Store and on Google Store. And so it's called Braze View, Braze, B-R-A-Z-E, View, V-I-E-W. And you can try it out. You can try it with clients. And so I'll show you a quick example of how you might use this app. So I'll go to the audio feedback button here. And what it gives you is this big orange button that says press for audio feedback. So a way that you might use this is, for example, you have a client that's in a power chair or a manual chair. You get them to line up in front of a wall, for example, and ask them to back up slowly towards the wall. And when they hear the audio beep, to stop, right? And so in the case of power chair, maybe get them to just take their hand off the joystick. In the case of the manual chair, maybe just let go of the wheels. And then what you do as they're backing up and as they get close to the wall, you want to press this button. And what that does is offer a very similar audio cue as what our system offers. And so you can get a good sense of, can they hear the tone? Can they, are they responsive? Can they, do you notice a response when they hear the cue? And that's really what you're looking for. And so this is what I generally do as like my first test to see if the person's responsive. So even if they're not going to be using the audio cue and they're going to more rely on the visual and haptic, this is the easiest cue to understand, right? Because it's just a tone. And so it's a good way to just check for basic responsiveness. All right, so if I say, yes, the audio feedback works, that's great. So now I can go back and try some of the other feedback. And so here, let's do the visual feedback. Now this is just sort of trying to figure out whether the person can see all the colors, which is going to be necessary to be able to distinguish between warning and danger. And so it's looking to see whether they can see. So here you're just asking them, hey, can you see these colors, the red, the yellow, the blue? If they can't see the colors, you have the option of changing to different colors that perhaps they have better visibility. And this is great because if they can see any of the colors that are on this list, we can customize the system to show those colors. So our system is incredibly customizable. The colors can be customized, but the distances can also be customized. So the distance thresholds that I told you about, which was like the 1 feet, the 2 feet, and then the 2 feet and the 4 feet, are all the out of the box settings, but all of those can be customized with our Bluetooth app. And so, all of those things can be done. It can be done either by the vendor or by the therapist or by the client themselves. We have end users that have done that themselves, that they, are able to understand and have the cognition to be able to do that. So it's a very easy to use app. And so all of those parameters can be fine tuned. So once they say that they can see the colors, now we go into the concept of, do they understand the direction? So here it's showing that red light on the left, saying what direction is the control showing. And so you want the person to be able to identify that that's on their left side. Now, if they do have left-right confusion and they don't know that's left, but they understand that it's on their left side, you can change this and say, hey, kind of raise your hand in the direction of the obstacle you think there is. And then that way, that might be a way around the left-right confusion. So you want to be able to basically, administer the screening in such a way that you're able to identify whether the person is really understanding what's going on. And so you can adapt this as you want, but this is really meant to be sort of a conversation to see where the person's cognition is at. So now if the person selects left, it goes on to the next question. So here it's right. If I select right, and then this in the center is straight back with the Sentina. So if I get that wrong and I select left by accident, it's going to say, yeah, that doesn't seem right. Go back to try again. So there is an opportunity, to get things wrong sometimes and to just practice and get it right. So that's really it for the audio and visual feedback. Now there is a vibration module here as well. And what that does is works very similarly to the audio module. Here it's just asking if the client has spasticity. And in this case, we just want to ensure that they're not going to have some sort of spastic reaction to vibrations. So as long as they don't have an adverse reaction, we go ahead here. And this works very similarly to the audio button that I showed you earlier. When you press the button here, the whole phone vibrates. And so you might be able to use that, for example, to just tell if the person does have sensation. So, like tapping it on like their shoulder, their arm might give you a good sense of where they might have sensation. Now note that both the lights and the vibrations administered through the phone are really not as intense as in real life. So if they do pass these tests, then you've got good confidence that the system will work. But if they don't pass these tests, it doesn't mean that, that they just can't use the system. It just means that you probably need to do a little more exploring to see what can work for them. So the vibration on the phone is actually a little bit weaker than the vibrations that we offer. And so just because they don't feel a vibration on a phone doesn't mean necessarily that they won't feel the system vibrations. Similarly, they don't see the lights on the screen, especially if they've got some sort of vision issue. Screen visibility is quite a bit poorer than the visibility on our controller, and so they still might be able to see the controller. So this isn't really meant to, the tool isn't meant to necessarily exclude people. It's meant to give you a quick indication of who can likely benefit from the system, if that makes sense. So that's it for the setup here. And then the next question obviously is, okay, so if somebody passes to all of these tests, no problem, you've got pretty good confidence. The next step would obviously be to then put it, have the system installed and get an evaluation with the system. Now, if they don't pass these tests, there is another module here on the bottom called the Learn module, which does offer some opportunities for training. So let's say you do have someone with a cognitive impairment and you want to train them to understand what the lights mean because it's going to take them a little bit longer. This tool offers an opportunity for the person to be able to learn it, and they don't even necessarily need to be in the chair while they're learning it. So they can learn it at home, they can learn it kind of on their own, they can learn it with maybe a caregiver, like a family member helping them. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go into the Learn module here, and I'll show you one of them because I think this is the visual feedback I think is the most complex, but also the most useful. So for once you get past kind of the basic safety of the audio and the vibrations telling you that you just need to stop and so on, the visual feedback can really help with those maneuvers. So getting in through that tight doorway, the lights are really useful to tell you whether you're centered through a doorway. So if you're centered, you're off center, you'll actually see that one of the lights go red and the other one's yellow. And so from that asymmetry that you're not actually aligned in the center. So that does take a little bit more time. Even our users without cognitive impairment will typically take a few weeks before they get a hang of that functionality. And so I'll show you what the training for that looks like. So I'll go into there, and we've got 3 different types of ways in which we teach these concepts. So the first is just a basic instruction. The second is more scenario-based learning. And then the last one is almost like a game, like a simulator game that the client can do on their own. So I'll go into the first one here. These are just basic instructions, but they're with the help of illustrations. So here you've got someone in a chair. It's a certain distance away from the wall. You've got 3 yellow lights showing on the controller, and it's trying to say, the object is close to the rear of the wheelchair. Time to slow down. So it's trying to map, what the colors mean in terms of what the proximity is, as well as mapping that to what the person should probably do in that situation. Now in this case, the wheelchair is quite a bit closer to the wall, and so you're seeing 3 red lights. Object is very close to the rear of the wheelchair. Time to stop. So here's some basic instructions about how the proximity maps to the response. And then the next stage is direction instructions. So here it's trying to show the difference between the different indicators and what those mean. So you've got a bird's eye view of a chair here and a ball directly behind the chair. And so here it says object is very close to the rear center of the wheelchair. Time to stop. And as you go through, the object moves around. So here it's close to the rear left of the chair, time to stop. And here it's close to the rear right of the chair, time to stop. And so that's it for the direction instructions here. Now, the next type of learning strategy is the knowledge test. So this is a scenario-based learning. So here I have, you're in a wheelchair, you're trying to back up straight to a wall, and you see the following Braze signal. So you see a yellow light in the center and a red light on the right. Please describe how you think your wheelchair is oriented with respect to the wall. Is there any one of you that wants to take a shot at this so we make this a bit more interactive? Is there anyone who would like to unmute and just take a guess of how the chair might be aligned to the wall if the controller is showing a red light on the right and a yellow light in the center? Take a quick look at the chat. Or you can type out the answer on the chat window as well if you've got any ideas.
I'll give this a try. It's Louise. So I would say I would be very close to the wall on the right, but getting closer to the rear of the wall.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm going to check the answer right here. And it's got an illustration to show what that might look like. And so you can see the right side of the chair is closer, and they're kind of approaching the center as well. So the wall is very close to the rear right and close to the rear center. And so you can start again, like kind of talk through, well, what do you do in this case, right? And you can start to have that conversation with the client. So they might say, okay, well, I'm getting too close to the right. I got a line here. So they need to be kind of steering so that they are more centered. So that's one example, and that we've got a couple of other examples like this. So in the next example, the chair is actually stationary. So this is teaching the concept that it's not always that the person is getting close to an object. Sometimes it's the case that an object is getting close to the person as well. So here you're stationary and you see the following signal, this yellow light in the center. What do you think that means? And so here I'm going to check the answer, and it says an object is approaching from the rear center of the chair, right? And the final example here is backing through a doorway or an elevator. So again, very, very common task to do. You're going through the doorway and elevator, and you see the following Braze signal. How are you oriented? This was similar to the one that Louise just answered, but just slightly different. And so here, this might be an example. Now, no, this is not the only such scenario, right? So there could be a lot of other situations that could create this controller light to light up in this way. So the point here is having that conversation, seeing these examples, and just understanding if the client's saying something that makes some sort of sense, right? So if they're saying anything that sort of implies that there is a part of their chair that centers part of their chair is too close, and their right side is also getting close, as long as they're able to explain it in a way that shows that they understand that, they're understanding the concept. And so here in this example, the chair is actually like almost kind of approaching the actual edge of the doorway itself. And so again, the response is fairly similar though, because they will need to make an adjustment here. They'll need to move the center of their chair away, and there is more space on the left side. So steering to the left would be a good maneuver here. All right, so that's it for, so I'm just gonna get back here to the training. That's it for the scenario-based knowledge test. And then the last one is an obstacle simulator. So here we have a chair facing forwards. We've got the danger zone marked in red and the warning zone marked in yellow. And I have a control signal here that's saying yellow light on the left side. The aim of the game here is to touch the part of the back of the chair where the obstacle might be that might result in this sort of signal. And so if there's a yellow light here, because there's already a yellow cue here, this means that you already know that it's going to be in the warning zone, and so you can jump right to the yellow zone. And what you want is to be able to just map the directionality. So I'm going to go to the yellow zone here, and because it's on the left, I'm going to tap that on the left right there. And so it says correct, and I can go on to the next question. And here, again, it's showing a left, but it's showing a red light in this case. So I'm going to map that to the red zone and go on the left side. and so on. So you can keep going here. This is random, and there's an infinite number of questions, so you can literally keep going and getting more questions. So this is good practice for someone to be able to do kind of their own home. And, you know, once they achieve a level of proficiency with this, then you know that, you know, they understand what's going on here. Now, if I go to the next level here, it will gray out all of the colors. And so now I no longer have the cue of what that red light means. So I need to map that to, if it's red, that's going to be closer to the chair. So I'm going to go up to that danger zone here and then touch the left. So this is the next level, obviously a little more level of difficulty, where they're now needing to both understand what the color means as well as what the directionality is. So that's basically it for this specific tool. And the reason I wanted to share this tool is because, you know, I was very excited about when we developed this. You know, we really developed it as sort of a screening tool for therapists to be able to get some indication of whether a client can benefit. But what really amazed me is I ended up using this tool with someone with traumatic brain injury, where initially they weren't really receptive or responsive to the system. And so everyone around him, they kind of his family and his caregiver, just kind of attributed it to the brain injury and said he just clearly doesn't understand what's going on. He's not understanding what he's supposed to do when he hears the beep and so on. And so I decided to take that opportunity to give this app a test. And so I asked the client to see if he could do this, the simulator with me. And the simulator is not exactly easy. I mean, you saw that there's a lot of mapping to do. I mean, understanding what the red light means and then looking to where it is and really mapping a control signal that you see on the controller to what that means in this like 2D environment. But what was incredible was he responded and got those answers right and responded at a speed much faster than any of the interns or even a professor that I had tested this with. And so his response rate was almost prodigal, which really raised the question of, well, what was going on there then? You know, he understood the lights. He understood what that meant for whether there was an obstacle and what side it was on. And that really prompted me to then have more detailed discussions with him about what was going on. And when he was in the chair with the system and it was prompting him to have that live conversation saying, okay, well, what's going on here? You know, what, and when he wouldn't respond, to say, well, what are your thoughts right now? And we actually learned that there were a lot of other things that were going on. It wasn't so much that he wasn't understanding, but it was more so that he expected the system to work in a specific way. And when it didn't match his expectations, he didn't want to respond. And so a simple example was if he was driving forwards and the back of his chair was getting too close to an obstacle and it beeped, he didn't think that was appropriate because he was driving forwards. And he said, well, you know, why is it beeping? It shouldn't be beeping because I'm not going to hit it. I'm going in a different direction. And that was really, really good feedback for us, because what it meant was that we had to potentially have other adaptations of the system where it was only providing feedback in the direction that the person was actually moving. So that was fantastic to also give us an awareness of how people might be perceiving the feedback and, you know, what motivates them. And in his case, there was also a motivation issue because there was a lot of negative reinforcement in his environment, and there wasn't a whole lot of motivation for him to actually respond to the prompt and do the right thing. And so there's also that whole aspect of driving, which is, you know, is the person actually feeling motivated and incentivized to drive safely. And so I think there's a lot of different pieces there. And I think this tool was really just sort of a baby step to help us break down what is really a very complex process of operating a power chair into some smaller pieces, more manageable pieces, perhaps, to help us understand what's going on and how the person's perceiving it and what their limitations and barriers are in terms of driving safely. So that was just a sneak peek, and that was the researcher in me. Of course, like, you know, we're now encouraging a lot of therapists to use this tool. We've got a lot of therapists that are quite excited about using the simulator tool, not just as a sort of a pre-screening tool for the Braze system, but also as a standalone tool, because what we hear oftentimes is when the therapist is trialing a new power chair, that there's often a lot of anxiety with the person driving power for the first time and potentially bumping into things, and then the therapist kind of needing to yell or run after them with a kill switch to stop the chair. And so this might provide an opportunity for a therapist to actually step back and offer this sort of feedback in a universal, you know, way, like a universal, a standard cue that's not yelling to slow down or whatever else. And so it might help to create a safer learning environment for the individual, and also help reduce some of the stress of the therapist in that whole training process, where the therapists don't necessarily have a lot of tools to help with that training and assessment process. And so this could be just another little tool in your kit while you're going through that whole process of trying to figure out who's eligible for power mobility. So I'll stop right there and take any last questions. I think we've got about 10 minutes left on the call. And if any of you, I'm curious to hear if any of you do have some ideas for clients that you're thinking of. What sorts of challenges are you thinking about right now? Who do you think, do you have someone in mind who can benefit? Are there any challenges that you're thinking of for them? Like I mentioned, we do have a lot of customization ability. And so if you've got any thoughts, the cost, of course. So the package here is let me just bring this up again. So the Sentina, the controller, all of the mounting, all sells at $2,600 MSRP. And so the additional accessories are fairly cost effective. So these little sensors are just over $300 each. That can be added on to the Sentina system. And the vibration modules are just over $40, I think, per module. And the reason I'm giving approximates is because I usually deal in US dollars, but it's around that. So that's the MSRP. And so in terms of coverage and funding, March of Dimes did cover the unit for another client 100%. And so we think with the price point that we have, being under $3,000, there could be a lot of opportunity for funding. And so March of Dimes is obviously one that we know where their mandate is very closely aligned with independent mobility, and being able to show that this unit can, in fact, potentially reduce some of the reliance on caregivers because they're able to navigate even in their own home more independently. That would be a great fit for an agency like March of Dimes. We've also spoken with like OFCP and WSIB could be another potential funding agency. So we are interested in that, and CNIB and so on. So there are a lot of opportunities for funding here. I mean, it is a new product, and so there will just need to be a little bit of education, and we're happy to educate on what the product does. I think now what we saw with at least March of Dimes was there was an understanding right away in that, the review, the letter that we got back said, hey, it's a no-brainer. We see these sensors in cars these days. It's really something that is clearly important for safety, and it's time that kind of technology was on wheelchairs as well. So we have seen a lot of positive responses from some of the agencies that could fund these, and and we're looking for more. We do have in Canada, we do have a published article of numerous funding sources that we can look into as well and help out with, and so there's a lot of charities and so on that potentially could be a good fit for a price point like that. Have you found long-term care and RH facilities open to this equipment? Absolutely. The two long-term care residents that I mentioned were actually a long-term care facility in Ontario. And in fact, they have now mandated, so any residents that are in power chairs that have safety issues, it's almost become policy now where as long as those residents continue to have our sensors and then the staff is able to see that they're safe, they will allow those residents to continue driving in power mobility. So it has been a game changer, and we have seen numerous facilities both in Canada and the US that have started to shift their policies around whether somebody can continue to drive their power chair, based on whether they have these sensors or not, just because the difference is so noticeable in terms of the person's spatial awareness when they're driving. Have we approached Ministry of Health ADP? So the short answer is no. It's a very difficult process to get a new product because this product is not under an existing code with ADP. Getting a new product listed with ADP, especially with the current climate with ADP, we've sort of put that on hold for now. We're still waiting to get more clarity on where ADP is going to go and how that whole thing is going to be structured. Getting a new code is very difficult, though. I mean, if you think about it, they don't really fund other safety related equipment either, like headlights and things like that. And so, you know, it might be a longer road with us providing enough, perhaps, clinical evidence and then trying to get them to essentially open up a new code for something like this. We have talked to therapists in the past about other existing codes that could potentially be used, but for now it seems to all go kind of under custom codes, or you know, we've seen some going under
EWC.
Perhaps communication devices, you know, as a visual aid. So there are a couple of options. I think, you know, it's about being creative as well. But you know, right now, I think ADP code, I think, is going to be a little while. And the process with ADP is just so complex. I mean, you know, I think we understand the process in the U.S. a little bit better, and there is a scope for conversation and you know, people that we can talk to there. With ADP, every time I've kind of approached it, it's been sort of a bit of a black box, and there isn't really a lot of consultation. And so if you don't really fit under an existing code, it can be very difficult to get a new product coded. But I mean, if there's anyone here who can help us with those discussions, we'd love that. It's, you know, obviously we need a lot of therapist advocacy, and I do believe we do need a lot of sign-offs with a lot of therapists to push and advocate for this sort of product to be coded. And so, you know, we'd love to engage further. And if any of you do have any experience with perhaps other products that have, you know, new products in the market that have successfully been coded, we'd love to get your advice on that, because that's something that's fairly new for us and still learning to navigate. Yes, absolutely. So someone asked if we can share a copy of the recording or send the information. Yes, this is recording, and so we can absolutely share it with all of you. Is there a single contact that we should send the recording to, or if all of you actually just want to provide your emails on this chat, then we can send it to all of you as well. And there is actually a whole resources part of the website where you can sign up and you can get all of the resources, and we can send you that link as well. So if you would like some follow-up information, please feel free to just put your email address down in the chat box, and Namit here will send a follow-up.
I think they have registered for the for this, so we already have their emails. I had one question before we let everybody go. Is that so in terms of CBI Health, what kind of organizational structure you guys have? Is it centralized, like sort of a organization, or is it a localized, and if couple city makes a block and they have an independent sort of leadership and organizational structure? If anybody can answer that.
Okay, so yeah, I guess if anyone does have, I guess, a contact in any of the other, perhaps other regions, or I guess head office or something like that, would be fantastic to just get a contact, I guess, and then we can follow up and see what would need to be done to arrange a webinar with some of the other groups across Canada.
All right. I think thank you everyone for attending the webinar, and we look forward to working with you guys. And yeah, so I guess that would be Tracy Shonk Lacey. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. So we will follow up and try to do more of these. But do let us know in the meanwhile if you've got any ideas for clients. Just the app, like I mentioned, is pretty easy to get a hold of. So if you'd like to, have another one-on-one with me to kind of go through some of that, or to arrange an eval, we can definitely arrange either an in-person or a virtual eval with any clients that you think might benefit. So thanks so much for organizing. Thanks, Luis. And yeah, it was great to see all of you, or at least be on a call with all of you, and hopefully we'll get to see you all soon.